Well, it's nice to see so many old faces and some young faces. I was looking at the pictures there, how young we all looked once. And we're still fighting on, and the cause really, I think you're going to hear today some of the exciting stuff that's going on, and there's a new atmosphere around, and I'm going to say a little about that in a minute. Welcome to our new venue. The names around there are quite interesting. I was wondering if they were all players for Chelsea or Arsenal or some London soccer teams or something, but you should have a look at them because there's some great names there. I don't know who they are, I have no idea. All I know is this is a great venue. There's two things the British do rather well and a million things they do pretty badly. But what they do well is find lovely buildings to have meetings in with a lot of history there. And we make lovely films for TV, Downton Abbey and Thrones and all that kind of stuff. And I'm sure some of the filming takes place in buildings like this on the cheap. Because around here there's so many lovely buildings, and Buckingham Palace is not a bad place now and again. Most of you are paying for it, so you should try and get in sometime. So there's a lot of competition. And this place here in George Street has, over the years that I've come to London, really started to market itself to get conferences. And I think it's a splendid environment, and congratulations to Richard and Pia for moving us from along the road to, I think, a much more friendly place for people with disabilities, and the facilities are pretty marvellous. I should say that Richard and Pia, I'll say this at the end too, but some of you may not make it throughout the day. I just want to say they do an amazing job, and they've got us here again. And you can see over the years, their energy is completely boundless. I see them because we live in Norwich now and again, and you've got to keep them quiet sometimes. They're very ambitious for ME, and I think many other things as well, and I think they stimulate people, and I think the audience we get every year, where they come from all parts of the United Kingdom and the world, just shows you how much they're held in esteem by many of us. So thank you very much, guys, and your team for what you do to make this conference, and well done for getting 1 George Street. A long time ago, dearly beloved, 10 years, I was a representative of the people. Well, like Donald Trump, Same sort of thing. Everybody's a representative of the people. I'm not going to say any more about Donald Trump. He's a fascinating character, and I think I'm destined to assassinate him. Because if he comes to Scotland, he's got it coming to him, I can tell you. If he tries to build any more golf courses and keep women out of the golf houses of the Scotland, he's going to lose, I tell you. And there's a whole culture up there of anti-Donald Trump. So you can have him in England, I might say, but in Scotland, no way, Donald, don't bother, Stay there and carry on, because I think the people in the United States will sort him out one way or the other. No, 10 years ago, a young man approached me when I was the tribune of the people, as it were, and he said, Ian, I'm not your constituent, you don't represent me actually, but I think there's a problem, and I've got it, and it was ME. And I went to see him, because obviously he couldn't get out of the house, I went to see him. And, as an MP, you're kind of cynical about things. You think, oh, this is just another problem like a level crossing, like the rabbits are eating the flowers on my husband's grave. I actually had that case. How do you stop rabbits eating flowers on my husband's grave? I found out that rabbits don't eat daffodils. I never knew that. And all the work I'd had at university and experience I had of this, that, and the other molecular biology, I never knew that outstanding fact, which was of great relevance to somebody, and they've been grateful ever since. But this young man got me stimulated because, I could tell there was something there. Now, the question is, do you want to get involved? And it is 10 years now, and I actually then looked for other people who had similar problems, and I found 2 or 3 constituents who couldn't get out of the house, young women, as a matter of fact, who were living in facilities which were disgraceful for 20th century Britain, and they had the same kind of problem. And I thought, okay, let's do something about it. So I decided I'd set up an inquiry in the House of Commons. Now, setting up anything in the House of Commons or the House of Lords in Britain is a fool's paradise, I can tell you. because whatever you do, whatever you say, you're going to get criticism. But then you have to have broad shoulders if you go into politics. Nobody loves you. Your family hate you first, and then it extends from there. But I took it up, and I got some very distinguished people from the House of Lords and Commons. It wasn't a party issue. We didn't make it a party issue. We had people who knew a bit about health and public health. We had a president of a Royal College who was on it. So it was very difficult. And in politics, when you get a broad range of people, you start compromising. And the issue in politics is how far do you compromise till you're out, you know? And that is always a difficulty in life. And as you all know in your own walks of life, there's a point when you say, I've had enough. But we got into it, and we did lots of inquiries, and many of the people in the audience here gave us evidence, and other people from outside. And we came out with a report 10 years ago, which received, as usual, as you get in any field in health, a bit of criticism. And this was what we said. It was one of the things we were interested. We learned about the biomedical psychiatric debate and so on, and the arguments. And people said after the inquiry they were kind of disappointed that we'd kind of compromised a bit. Now, I make no excuses for compromise. Yes, I do. I'm hard as nails, really deep down. But we compromised to the extent that we said, yeah, biomedical science in this area needs a lot more investment. And we came out and said it, which was brave. But we kind of compromised, and the reason was, and I can say this publicly, I never said it at the time because I'm not going to tell you the truth, I'm a politician, and at the time it was all about, you know, certain people were going to come off the committee who were quite prominent and very, very forceful and very influential if we didn't say something about psychiatry, because it would damage their career. I remember it very well in a room. It would damage their career. So I kind of understood what that meant, because when you're in a career, you have to interact with people who you violently disagree with, hate even, or love, whatever. And all sorts of emotions came out in terms of how people reacted to our inquiry. But we came out and said that the Medical Research Council in Britain should get off its backside and put more money into this kind of field. And that was 10 years ago. We're criticised, as I say, for saying too much about psychiatry and so on and listening to the psychiatrists talking. But we understood what they were saying, and we understood the biomedical line too. So it started off then, and it's continued really ever since. Because in politics you have a snout, a feeling, a hunch that something is quite important, and I still believe that. I still believe there's a lot of illnesses and diseases that we need to approach in a completely different way. The medical argument about the one gene equals happiness, one gene equals homosexuality, one gene equals this, or maybe if you're a bit lax, two genes might be involved, or it's polygy. You just use a few words, but it's all determined from birth. And I've been brought up as a geneticist to believe that there was a terrible interaction between genes and environment, which we still don't understand completely, how genes are switched on and off. In fact, I was in a department where the word, an institute grew one day called epigenetics, and we didn't know what it was, and we were very clever genetics students at a time when genetics departments were stuck in botany. And we were only stuck in botany plant departments because Mendel had worked on plants. I never understood why I couldn't be in a zoology, because he came from the States where molecular biology was the rage, and suddenly they stuck you in a new university in Norwich at the University of East Anglia in a plant department. And I thought, what? Why is this? And I asked them, and they said, oh, we discussed where we were going to give you a lab, and we decided we'd put you in the botany section because Mendel was your hero. I said, no, it wasn't, you know. Mendel was rediscovered by other people. So anyhow, you learn in science how things happen, and we're kind of ready for this in the inquiry, the scientists who were involved there in terms of the approach. I somehow managed to get a statement, a question into Parliament a few months ago. I'm not going to tell you how, because I'd end up in the Tower of London if they found out. But we got an answer, and the question was, how many general practitioners in the United Kingdom have registered people with ME in each of the last 5 years? The Minister was very clear in the reply. It's all in Hansard. And she says, we don't keep data like that. We haven't done it since 2007, and it hasn't done us any good, giving out that data. In 2007, there were 4,000 cases per million of the population. So the government kind of, I wanted to hit, no, I didn't want to hit somebody. I just felt angry that kind of disrespect and reply for people who were suffering, who obviously had a real problem and needed support, and the government was doing nothing to help it. So it's being followed up, don't worry. And we've also done it with other illnesses and so on. And it's quite interesting how senior politicians in health who extol this, that, or the other, cancer and mental health, get lots of support and so on, think about ME as not even worth recording the number of cases. Now, I know there are arguments about how you do it, but you could make some kind of attempt to talk and classify the situation so that we knew what we were doing. So 10 years ago, it's still much the same. We haven't come on much from that. So anyhow, I think we're in a new dawn in this area now. We've had 3 days in another place in London, listening to the research that's going on, and it's moving along, sometimes slowly, sometimes fast, but people are interacting and talking now and realizing that biomedicine, its time has come in this arena and something needs to be done. Now forget, politicians only know about this about 20 years later. They never find out or somebody gets going. The political ways of getting things going are quite interesting, and that's what we're trying to do in ME as well. We're working on that front. I think what we need in this area is a pledge card. Now, it may sound corny and stupid. I was brought up in the Tony Blair era and was part of his government, and we had a pledge card. And John Prescott, who was the Deputy Prime Minister, used to flash this at meetings like this all the time, 5 pledges. And it was about, for example, cancer and about housing and so on. Well, we didn't do anything about 1 or 2 of the pledges, but at least there was something there which could be used to get people elected, yes, cynically, yes. On the other hand, you could push for different things. And it's something that you could hang up and say, these are the 5 priorities we're going to have. And I've put some of these up here. I think the collaboration that's beginning, that we've seen in the last 3 days with people in Europe are very important. And I would add to that now the interaction with the United States, because the next speaker comes from the United States, and we're beginning to talk about what they're doing, and we're going to hear the initiatives that are going on there. And I think it would be nice to say, this is a global problem. It's not just a European problem. It can be handled at that level, but it's a global problem. Now, I'm quite involved in climate change too, and go to the Paris conferences and all that kind of stuff. And I've watched it grow from Kyoto, where people promise everything, how they're going to work together, and they do nothing. I don't think that's going to happen in the ME field at all. I think it's growing through Europe, and it's going to become global. And one of the things I'm very interested in is I'm active in the United Nations at various levels, and I know people there who do health. And they do or they don't have a statement about ME. We often quote it. Now, I'm not sure if it's still in existence or not. There seems to be a little debate about whether it's going on. But what have they done, actually, in the United Nations about health? They've taken a lot of trouble to get Zika and Ebola into the arena. They've been forced by people in the political arena and so on. But they're having to do something. They're a bit late. They were a bit slow in getting moving. But pressure was put on them, and that has happened. And I think we could do the same thing with ME now, because we've been talking to people in the United Nations, and I think with the help of people in the States and other organizations, we could try and get something going on a global nature. It doesn't just happen in 1 or 2 countries. It's an international problem, and if we can handle climate change, Ebola and so on that way, we can do it this way too. Richard has said something about Centre of Excellence. It's great to get people together. Ron Davis and I have been talking about it through our experiences in molecular biology and watched how molecular biology grew in Centres of Excellence, getting the right people together. And we have here in London an organisation called the Crick Institute now, where Paul Nurse is running it. He comes from Norwich originally, incidentally, but he has got a very good perspective about research. And he is now opening up labs to people to come and work for 3 or 4 years on a subject, aren't working with each other in the kind of way that in Cold Spring Harbor they used to do in other places in the United States, and indeed Heidelberg in Europe was one place at one time for EMBO, the Molecular Biology Organization. And things come out of people working together, arguing together, agreeing together and so on. That's what's exciting about science. We won't agree about everything, but by gosh, we can know what we're arguing about and why we should be doing something about it. So it's an exciting time, and a proposal is floating around for Norwich or wherever. We may need several centres of excellence, and we've seen it in the cancer world where centres are set up, and things do happen when you get people working together and deciding what the issues are and prioritising things. Education is very important. I'm writing a book at the minute, and we've done some interviews with young students. Medical students in Holland, for example, other countries, if they get 5 minutes, where Emmy is mentioned, they're very lucky in their training. It's absolutely appalling that it's not seriously discussed. And we have to do something about that, and there's been a little discussion about it in the last 3 days and so on. So there's pledges that we can start to make. And then when we come back in a year and we'll say, well, what have we done about it? Have we moved it on? We have to kind of focus the debate on semi-political issues, yes, but on scientific issues, definitely, we need to prioritise things. So I think it's all beginning to happen. And as I say, it's a conference like this, I think, won't die because you're going to need people where they talk to the patient groups and the carers. Never forget the carers. Somebody told me last night, they remember me asking a question at a meeting here 3 or 4 years ago, how many people in the audience are carers? And it was packed with people who were carers, who know the problems and who get no recompense, no thanks for the hard work they do. And that is true for many illnesses in the health sector across this country. The world is full of people who care and want to help and support, and they don't get that support themselves, and quite often, sadly, become ill. I know many young people who have to come out of school because they have to look after mum or dad or granny or granddad and so on. And it's a quite disgrace when we're talking about Mars projects, so a wee bit of politics here, that we can find the money for proton therapy suddenly because a young man goes to Czechoslovakia and embarrasses the British government that there's no proton therapy. They have to go to Czech. So suddenly they decide to build one in Manchester and build one in London. Where did the money come from? They've been telling us there's no money. I've got thousands of stories like that, especially where computerisation is considered in the health service. Millions of pounds has been spent on computerisation programs trying to establish a general one, and it hasn't worked for all sorts of reasons. So I'm never one who thinks there's money's not around. It can be found if you're determined enough, and I think many of the people in this audience, if not all the audience, are determined enough to make things happen and shout loud enough. So I finish on this note, that I really do think it's a new dawn. Things are beginning to happen that weren't there 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and it's beginning to get not just exciting, but productive. People are now focusing on what needs to be done. So I think we need to say, let's shake that kaleidoscope a bit more and make those interactions, make a colourful picture that really, really churns up the health world, not just in this country, but for people in the developing world as well, because I think we have some answers that are coming along, how to make life better for people, and I think we are ordained to do it, frankly. Now, that sounds a bit, I think, over the top, but sometimes you have to believe or nothing happens. So please, please, listen to what's the talks today. They're very good, but there's been 3 days of talks and interaction. So thank you very much for listening.